amigos, ¿cómo están? Yo soy Gaby y espero que se encuentren súper bien la mañana de hoy, la tarde de hoy, la noche de hoy o cuando sea que estén viendo este videito. Hoy voy a hacer algo que la verdad yo no me había animado a hacer en este canal. Bueno, en ninguna parte, no solo en este canal. Les voy a estar leyendo en inglés, como ya pudieron ver en el título. Voy a estarles leyendo en inglés hoy. Entonces, la verdad no me había animado porque, no sé, sentía como miedo, tal vez, no lo sé. Y pues bueno, hoy me armé de valor porque encontré un libro súper bonito de Sherlock Holmes. Este estaba aquí en mi casa, la verdad no sé de quién sea. Se los juro que no tengo idea, no sé si era de mi mamá o a lo mejor de mi hermana, quién sabe, pero se me hizo súper lindo porque son short stories, historias cortitas de Sherlock Holmes. Entonces pues hoy me voy a animar a ver qué tal. Y antes que nada, antes de empezar, les quiero pedir algo. Muchos me han dicho, o muchos me han pedido, que cante canciones de Disney en un video de ASMR. Entonces quiero que pongan en los comentarios qué canciones les gustaría escuchar y de ahí voy a escoger algunas. Lo que pasa es que yo la verdad de Disney, las que me sé son como casi todas las de Toy Story, yo creo, sí, de hecho todas las de Toy Story me las sé. Me sé también de que la de Blancanieves, la de Blancanieves, y la verdad de ahí, no, en más no me acuerdo qué otras canciones podrían ser. Entonces pónganme en los comentarios qué canción de Disney les gustaría escuchar y pues así yo las canto a lo mejor en unas 2 semanitas después de escuchar bien las canciones y todo. Es que hagan de cuenta, o sea, sí, obviamente sí tuve infancia, sí vi las canciones de Disney y todo, pero no me las sé. Les digo que como que las que tengo muy presentes son las de Toy Story, pero las demás no, o sea, no me acuerdo de la letra ni nada. Entonces pues para saber más o menos qué es lo que les gusta, qué es lo que les gusta a ustedes, qué es lo que les gusta a las personas que me ven, pues yo creo que sería lo mejor que ustedes me pongan exactamente qué canción les gustaría escuchar. Pero bueno, así que voy a empezar con este libro a ver qué tal. Ok, les digo, no soy experta ni nada, pero lo voy a intentar. Ok, Sherlock Holmes short stories. When we think of a detective, we think first of Sherlock Holmes. Even now, 100 years after the first story about him, he's still the greatest detective of all. Tourists still go to Baker Street in London to see the place where he had his flat. There are films about him, pictures of him. We all know what he looked like. We all know what kind of clothes he wore. And yet, he never existed. The stories about him are just stories. So, why do we remember him? It is because he loves catching criminals. Sherlock Holmes chases the criminal as a hunter chases a fox. He's a bloodhound, a police dog, with his nose to the ground, following the criminal to the end of the world. The criminal may try to hide, but when Sherlock Holmes has started the chase, we know that he will finish it with a kill. Okay. The Speckled Band. Helen's story. At the time of this story, I was still living at my friend Sherlock Holmes' flat in Baker Street in London. Very early one morning, She looked tired and unhappy, and her face was very white. "I'm afraid of death, Mr. Holmes," she cried. "Please help me. I'm not 30. I'm not 30 yet, and look at me, at my gray hair. I'm so afraid." "Just sit down and tell us your story," said Holmes kindly. "My name is Helen Stoner," she began, "and I live with my stepfather, Dr. Grimsby Roylott, near a village in the country. His family was once very rich, but they had no money when my stepfather was born. So he studied to be a doctor and went out to India. He met and married my mother there, when my sister Julia and I were very young. Our father was dead, you see." Your mother had some money, perhaps?" asked Sherlock Holmes. "Oh yes, mother had a lot of money, so my stepfather wasn't poor anymore." "Tell me more about him, Miss Stoner," said Holmes. "Well, he's a violent man. In India, he once got angry with his Indian servant and killed him. He had to go to prison because of that, and then we all came back to England. Mother died in an accident 8 years ago, so my stepfather got all her money, but if Julia or I marry, he must pay us $250 every year." "And now you live with him in the country," said Holmes. "Yes, but he stays at home and never sees anybody, Mr. Holmes," answered Helen Stoner. He's more and more violent now, and sometimes has fights with the people from the village. Everybody is afraid of him now, and they run away when they see him. And they're also afraid of his Indian wild animals, which roam freely around the garden. A friend sends them to him. A friend sends them to him from India. Pardon. A friend sends them to him from India. Yeah. And the animals are not the only wild things in the garden. There are also gypsies. My stepfather likes these wild people, and they can come and go where they like. Poor Julia and I had very unhappy lives. We had no servants. They always left because they were afraid of my stepfather, and we had to do all the work in the house. Julia was only 30 when she died, and her hair was already gray, like my hair now." "When did she die?" asked Sherlock Holmes. "She died 2 years ago, and that's why I'm here. We never met anybody in the country, but sometimes we visited some of my family who live near London. There Julia met a young man who asked to marry her. My stepfather agreed, but soon after this she died." Mrs. Stoner put her hand over her eyes and cried for a minute. Sherlock Holmes was listening with his eyes closed, but now he opened them and looked at Helen Stoner. "Tell me everything about her death," he said. "I can remember it all very well. It was a terrible time," she answered. "Our 3 bedrooms are all downstairs. First, there is my stepfather's room. Julia's room is next to his, and my room is next to Julia's. The rooms all have windows on the garden side of the house and doors which open into the corridor. One evening, our stepfather was smoking his strong Indian cigarettes in his room. Julia couldn't sleep because she could smell them in her room, so she came into my room to talk to me. Before she went back to bed, she said to me, "Helen, have you ever heard a whistle in the middle of the night?" I was surprised. "No," I said. "It's strange," she said. "Sometimes I hear a whistle, but I don't know where it comes from. Why don't you hear it?" I laughed and said, "I sleep better than you do." So Julia went to her room and locked the door after her. "Why did you lock your doors?" asked Sherlock Holmes. "We were afraid of the wild animals and the gypsies," she answered. "Please go on," said Holmes. I couldn't sleep that night. It was a very stormy night with a lot of wind and rain. Suddenly, I heard a woman's scream. It was my sister's voice. I ran into the corridor, and just then I heard a whistle, and a minute later, the sound of falling metal. I didn't know what it was. I ran to my sister's door. She opened it and fell to the ground. Her face was white and afraid, and she was crying, help me, Helen. I'm ill. I'm dying." I put my arms around her, and she cried out in a terrible voice, "Helen, oh my God, Helen." It was the band, the speckled band. She wanted to say more, but she couldn't. I called my stepfather, who tried to help her, but we could do nothing. And so my dear sister died. "Are you sure about the whistle and the sound of falling metal?" asked Holmes. "I think so," answered Helen. "But it was a very wild, stormy night. Perhaps I made a mistake. The police couldn't understand why my sister died. The door was locked and nobody could get into her room. They didn't find any poison in her body. And what was the speckled band? Gypsies wear something like that around their necks. I think she died because she was so afraid, but I don't know what she was afraid of. Perhaps it was the gypsies. What do you think, Mr. Holmes?" Holmes thought for a minute. He said, "That is a difficult question, but please go on." "That was 2 years ago," Helen Stoner said. "I have been very lonely without my sister, but a month ago, a dear friend asked me to marry him. My stepfather has agreed, and so we're going to marry soon. But 2 days ago, I had to move to my sister's old bedroom because some men are mending my bedroom wall, and last night I heard that whistle again. I ran out of the house immediately and came to London to ask for your help. Please help me, Mr. Holmes. I don't want to die like Julia." "We must move fast," said Holmes. "If we go to your house today..." Quería estornudar, lo siento. "If we go to your house today, can we look at these rooms? But your stepfather must not know. He's in London today, so he won't see you." "Oh, thank you, Mr. Holmes. I feel better already." Okay. Holmes went out for the morning, but he came back at lunchtime. We then went by train into the country and took a taxi to Dr. Roylott's house. "You see," said Holmes to me, "our dangerous friend Roylott needs the girls' money because he only has $750 a year from his dead wife. I found that out this morning. But the gypsies, the whistle, the band, they are more difficult to understand, but I think I have an answer." When we arrived, Helen Stoner showed us the 3 bedrooms. We saw her room first. Why are they mending your bedroom wall? Asked Holmes. There's nothing wrong with it. You're right, she said. I think it was a plan to move me into my sister's room. Yes, said Holmes. We went into Julia's room, and Holmes looked at the windows carefully. Nobody could come in from outside, he said. Then he looked around the room. Why is that bell rope there, just over the bed? My stepfather put it there 2 years ago. It's for calling a servant, but Julia and I never used it because we didn't have any servants. He also put in that hairband on the wall between his room and this one. Holmes pulled the rope. But it doesn't work, he said. How strange. And it's just over the air vent. That also is interesting. Why have an air vent on an inside wall? Air vents are usually on outside walls. Then we went into Dr. Roylott's room. Holmes saw a large metal box near the wall. My stepfather keeps business papers in there, said Helen. Does he keep a cat in there too? Asked Holmes. Look, there was some milk on a plate on top of the box. No, Mrs. Turner, he said. I think your life is in danger. Tonight my friend Watson and I must spend the night in your sister's room, where you are sleeping at the moment. Helen Stoner and I looked at him in surprise. Yes, we must, he went on. We'll take a room in a hotel in the village. When your stepfather goes to bed, put a light in your sister's bedroom with a window and leave it open. Then go into your old room and we'll get into your sister's room through the window. We'll wait for the sound of the whistle and the falling metal. How did my sister die, Mr. Holmes? Do you know? Please tell me, said Helen. She put her hand on Sherlock Holmes' arm. I must find out more before I tell you, Mrs. Stoner. No, goodbye, and don't be afraid, replied Sherlock Holmes. We walked to the village, and Holmes said to me, "Tonight will be dangerous, Watson. Roylott is a very violent man. But if I can help, Holmes, I shall come with you," I said. Thank you, Watson. I will need your help. Did you see the bell rope and the airband? I knew about the airband before we came. Of course, there is a hole between the two rooms. That explains why Helen's sister could smell Dr. Roylott's cigarette. My dear Holmes, how clever of you, I cried. And did you see the bed? It's fixed to the floor. She can't move it. It must stay under the rope, which is near the air vent. Holmes, I cried. I began to understand what a terrible crime. Yes, this doctor is a very clever man, but we can stop him, I think, Watson. Así que hasta ahí les voy a leer hoy, amigos. Espero que les haya gustado y que les pueda servir un poquito para relajarse. A mí me gustó muchísimo leerles esto.